So we're gonna move on to movies. We're gonna move on to a movie that both Augmented Biscuits and I have actually watched, and it's the new Godzilla film. It's called Shin Gojira. From what I've been told from a Japanese fan, that's like saying it's God Godzilla. It's like the ultimate Gojira.
Double the god.
Yeah, double the god, basically. Okay. Now, as you know, I think Legendary came out with a Godzilla film back in 2014. Not a bad film. I mean, I would say it's pretty enjoyable, but it does have sort of a U.S. sensibility to it. There's a character. He's a guy who's a family man. He wants to protect his family. Yada yada yada. A giant monster and another giant monster appears, and they fight each other at the end. Spoiler alert. To me, like a Godzilla movie from Toho or from Japan, other than like the '60s Godzilla, which is called the Showa era, most of the movies are supposed to have some kind of underlining meaning. They're supposed to have this sort of like moral in play. In the original Godzilla film, Gojira, it was about like sort of the horrors of nuclear attack. That movie became popular, led to many sequels. You could argue that Godzilla and Toho kind of created their own cinematic universe because they created other monsters like Mothra. They created Rodan. They created a whole bunch of other like sort of single monster stories and then brought them together in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Dragon, Godzilla versus Mothra, Monster Zero, Destroy All Monsters, and it just went crazy after that. So let's like fast forward to now. There hasn't been a Godzilla movie in about like 12 years from Japan, and I guess they wanted to do something different here. They wanted to show in Shin Gojira sort of the ridiculousness of bureaucracy and government and how a decision is made. In this movie, I don't want to spoil it too much, but when Gojira does appear, it's more about people having these like meetings, and I know that does sound like the most boring thing ever, but you have to kind of see this in the eyes of like how I guess realistic or practical like a country would be to handle a giant monster. They probably would get into a meeting and just start discussing about it and waste a lot of time while a lot of people got hurt or killed. I mean, maybe you could see the only parallel I would say that would make sense in this case is the floodings that happened a while back ago in New Orleans and Florida, and then how it took forever to get relief and like basically the government to be involved in helping these citizens out. In this case, I guess they're trying to do a take on the earthquake that happened in Japan a while back ago, and how ridiculous I guess like the government like just ran in, basically hitting rakes and getting whacked in the face and basically making just idiots of themselves until they finally figured like they needed to do something more practical.
One thing that you mentioned, is how they reacting to Gojira is very much akin to a natural disaster, and I like that. I think that's one thing that the last American Godzilla movie didn't really, do very well. That the Japanese movies always do is they don't treat Godzilla as a monster. They treat him as like a force of nature, like an earthquake or a huge tsunami or a huge like tropical storm. I think that was a problem that we had with the American Godzilla that just came out recently. Although I enjoyed it, watching this new Godzilla really makes you kind of compare the two and realize like what they did wrong. Granted, I did like the monster fight and things like that, but I will say that I think the American Godzilla was closer to the Showa era, as opposed to this Godzilla is actually closer to. I know we talked about this after we watched this. Like one of the first Godzilla movies I watched was actually Godzilla 1985 with Raymond Burr, and in that movie, Godzilla wasn't this kind of like good force of of monster fighting. He was just this giant fucking force of nature that they were dealing with. So Token Dice was talking about how there's all this, the government has these meetings in regards to reacting to Godzilla, and just it's all these just bureaucracy and just people talking, one after another, but nothing's getting done. I feel, while watching this movie, I felt that was very much akin to how it is, how it is for a corporate workplace. What happens when you make a mistake in a very corporate environment is you end up having like you end up having this 2 hour meeting with your boss, and and he's and they're just constantly asking you this entire 2 hour meeting. They're trying to find out, why did you make the mistake? What can you do to prevent the mistake? What do you need to change in your behavior to not make the mistake anymore? Essentially, this entire meeting is about you making that one mistake. Similar like Office Space,
Yeah.
like Office Space, like TPS reports. Peter forgets the TPS reports, and how many phone calls does he get from his bosses? He's telling the bosses. He's like, I have 8 different bosses, so whenever I make a mistake, I have to hear from 8 different people that I made that mistake. He's like, and that just gives me more of a reason not to do anything, because I don't want anyone bothering me when I make a mistake. Which is again, it's funny because that's essentially what the human parts of this Godzilla movie are, is just everyone just it's constant talking, but there's no action. But I think what makes the human parts more bearable and actually enjoyable in this case in this movie is the director does a lot of quick cuts, so they really make you feel like you're in the center of that kind of human drama that's very frantic, but also there's this sense of urgency and kind of like the clock's ticking. What are we gonna do? We have to make sure we save our citizens. But again, it gives you kind of this feeling of frustration, but also this kind of urgency to do something.
So the film was directed by Hideki. It's actually directed by two people, Hideki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. They one of them worked on Attack on Titan, and another one worked as a special effects wizard on some of the 90s Gamera films. He wasn't the director. He was actually just like a special effects kind of like personnel, which shows a lot in this movie, because the sort of like I would say miniatures that were shot, and I'm not sure if there were miniatures. I heard that this is one of the first Gojira films to use mostly motion capturing.
The U.S. is in the background quite a bit towards the end of the film, like the second half, and are like kind of this looming presence of, making this certain decision. I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but they want to make this certain decision that Japan's like, yeah, that's not like the best course of action, but again, it goes back to that end of World War II treaty of, well, we're America, we made you sign that treaty.
I'm gonna spoil it a little bit. So like it kind of it boils down to, like, I used to have this roommate. We used to talk a lot, and like he would always ask about like North Korea, like I knew anything about it, because my parents are from South Korea, and I visited South Korea. The closest I've got to North Korea is going to the DMZ and looking through some binoculars to see what was over there, and all I saw was trees. But like you hear all these like sort of rumors about like the dangers of North Korea, and like how the leadership is run and stuff like that. And his like says, well, why don't we just nuke them? And like my thought is like, do you know what that can cause? And he's like, no, it'll just wipe them out. It's like, okay, so a nuke isn't an eraser that you bring it down and it just erases the problem.
It's an existence eraser. Yeah.
It's pretty much, yeah. That's right. It's an existence eraser. You nuke a country, that neighboring country is going to suffer a lot of repercussions, whether it be like pollution or the fallout or whatever. I mean, it's not that easy, guys. You can't just say, well, we'll just nuke them. Like if that would be an easy problem, then everyone would be doing it left and right. Like it goes back to the original Gojira film. You have to show the horrors of that, and like Japan is the only country that I know that has gone through those horrors, other than like maybe nuclear meltdowns and stuff like that. But this is an actual, like, they were the only victims of a nuclear attack, so they take it way more personally than other countries.
And very understandably personally, because again, we can't iterate this enough. Japan has been the only nation who has suffered a nuclear attack, and as much as that's a stain on humanity that happened, it's very important that people remember that, because again, this is one of the underlying messages, and it's actually great because this movie has several underlying messages. That's one of the big ones, which is you can't just solve everything with nukes. You can't just not with force. But what's also great about this is that they also have these kind of for the human parts, they have these kind of like cast of kind of misfits and outcasts who people really didn't want to listen to or take into consideration. And it's funny because again, you feel frustrated during all these human scenes, but it ends up being these kind of like outcasts and misfits, and not really in the sense of like they were shunned, more like their opinions weren't actually at the forefront because they weren't as important on the corporate ladder.
What I'd like to share about those misfits, it's like they're not like, when you say misfits, like everyone has this like sort of picture of like hackers and like they're all wearing like hoodies and whatever. Like they weren't even like that. They were just like, some of them were younger, some of them were older, some of them like were dressed a little eclectic, but it's not to the point where they were like you couldn't take them too seriously. Some of them were army guys. They were army personnel that no one wanted to listen to. And then like there's this great scene where a guy just sums it up. He's like, okay, you guys are the weirdo, the nerds, the misfits, the rebels, but we're the decision makers now. And it was just kind of a cool scene where like they were said, okay, let's solve this problem. And like you saw like the sort of like parallel of this group working together as to the group that was the main government, where there's this really funny scene in it where one guy says, this is what we have to do. And then like, and he's talking to his own group, and like the guys are looking at each other, and then they kind of look at him. He's like, which one of you are you talking to right now?
I thought the design of Godzilla was great. He was very, very scary looking, as far as like, I wouldn't say scary where he's going to frighten you. For me, it was more of a, wow, that looks really creepy and a little bit disturbing. For me, the disturbing part were the teeth and the eyes. It was a little disturbing. The design of him, he's very huge and he has a giant tail. But also what was great was, and this is the same kind of feeling I had when I watched the 2014 Godzilla, is when he finally uses his atomic breath. In this one, they kind of upped the ante and gave him like this kind of multi-attack atomic breath. But also the way they did it was, I thought they had a really cool explanation of the atomic breath. Kind of goes into how they actually bring him down, or more like kind of put him in hibernation. But I know we talked about this. The way the design of the atomic breath was, when he shoots his atomic breath, his actually mouth opens up, kind of like a giant blade, kind of like the Predator. Kind of like the Predator mouth, or like Blade 2, where the mouth opens up, which I thought was really cool. I did notice though that there were some CG shots of Godzilla that were a little sloppy, on a little maybe crummy.
I give him a pass.
I give him a pass too. Some of the shots were a little crappy. I almost laughed when they first introduced Godzilla, because the initial form was kind of funny. And I don't know, I don't think we mentioned this, but one of the directors is actually one of the guys who did Eva, the Eva anime, the Evangelion Neon Genesis, the fucking Shinji. But I really dug. Even the American parts were actually really fucking great and funny. There's one especially scene that no one in the theater couldn't stop laughing at. This part was, American joins the fray and they're like, okay, we'll take care of this, and they start dropping bombs on Godzilla, and the guys in the war room are like, oh my god, the Americans did it. He's like, holy shit, good job, America. And then it kind of just doesn't work, and they're like, god damn it. And I actually really dug I don't know, were they miniatures for like the tanks and stuff like
in terms of the miniatures, I couldn't tell if they were CG or miniature, which I think is a good thing, because usually I'm pretty good at it, but like they've been like kept, at least they've kept like the production of this film pretty top secret until its release. And we did there was like a sort of blurb that they did try to do suitimation for the entire thing, but they weren't getting the results they wanted. So they decided to do motion capture, and other times they were actually using a maquette as a model, or maybe even as like an effect on what they were doing on screen. But they did want to give it a different feel, and like I don't know where miniature was and where CG was. I was assuming that like maybe there's like a Apache helicopter scene that was CG. Yeah, I think they did a really good job blending it, and like you don't really see that in a lot of Japanese. Usually in Japanese films, they either embrace the CG and it looks very sort of unrealistic, but that's through intention. Or you do the normal miniature thing with all their kaiju films, and then like occasionally, yeah, even their older kaiju, like, at least from the millennia age and some of the Heisei, they have done CG, here and there, but it wasn't really blended that well. You could just tell it was CG, but that could have been just like a stylistic choice.
Was there any criticisms you had for the film?
Like I guess the parts that kind of stuck out to me is when Japanese people started speaking English, and like some of it worked. Yeah, others were really awkward. Especially there's this woman who plays sort of like this American diplomat. She's actually Japanese, but she's from America, and that's how they play it. She starts pronouncing stuff, and like there's this part where she says like I just came home from a party. That's why I didn't have time to dress, and like it just sounds weird. Other times it's okay because she'll just say one word, and like someone will have a theory on Godzilla, she'll go yes. But like other times, like when they start speaking sort of English like casually to each other, it kind of sticks out.
I think there was times where it was unnecessary. Like, why did we need this in English? I understand there was parts where they had actually U.S. personnel and they were speaking English, and that was fine. But yeah, the scenes where the Japanese actors were speaking to each other, and then all of a sudden they pull out these English. They start speaking English, which is a little awkward, it's a little jarring. I know one of the criticisms people have is the English actors that they had in there. The I think few that they had in there. A lot of people said that their delivery was very wooden and very bad. I mean, my theory was that they are probably maybe last minute additions, possibly.
What I've been learning from kind of learning from backgrounds of like how video games are directed, because like they'll use English voice actors for some Japanese games such as Resident Evil, and I've been learning from like from other classic movies as well, from going on from Gojira and a lot of other Japanese sort of science fiction films, is that they kind of get American actors and they want them to say it in a sort of precise manner, because that's how Japanese accept sort of dialogue being delivered. It's this very precise way of speaking. That's why it's very when you listen to or when you watch Resident Evil, like I think the director's cut, how they're talking is really weird.
You're talking about the voice acting in the video game for it.
Yeah, the voice acting in the video game, where they say like Barry, where's Barry? They want them to actually deliver it like that. I don't think it's like an acting thing. I think it's a cultural thing. I think that's what they feel that it should be, and like how they want to present it. Okay, so we're gonna move on to Train to Busan. I actually had an opportunity to watch this. If you haven't heard of Train to Busan, it's a Korean horror movie. It has to do with a train, like going to Busan, and basically what happens, it gets infected with zombies.
For those who don't know Korean geography, South Korea geography, that's a city or.
Busan is a city, like I don't know, I guess a sort of a town. Suburb-esque, at least the part that I've seen. I've been there. That's where I believe my mom grew up. It's I don't remember too well. I do remember not Japanese, but the bathhouse, and my dad said like let's go to I was like a teenager, and it's like, hey, let's go to the bathhouse. I'm like, okay, and so we go down there, and there's like just like a huge room of old naked men like cleaning themselves and stuff like that. That's what I remember of Busan. So people are taking a train to this weird place.
They take trains. They take trains to a bathhouse with a bunch of old men bathing themselves.
Apparently, but like I guess so. I'm not gonna spoil it too much. It's about this dad. And he's taking his daughter to Busan because that's where her mom lives, and like he's divorced. And he lives, he works in the city, and he's a very busy finance officer. So it's a weird sort of, I guess you could say, study on the differences, the hierarchy of class, I guess. And some people will say that this is a different take on, say, Snowpiercer, which is about the same thing, and it also takes place in a train. This is more of like a more metro train. It's not that this weird future where like the world's frozen over. But this is more of a weird future where there's zombies and stuff. And I have to say that the film is like very melodramatic at times, which like if people have like kind of watched Korean movies, there are actually really good Korean movies. There's the Vengeance trilogy. There's all the works of Bong Joon Ho. There's like all the works of Ji Won Kim. They've done there's so many different movies in there. Memories of Murder, The Host, Mother, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, I Saw the Devil. A lot of films like that. But this one like makes this study of like how people kind of help each other. The little girl basically doesn't connect with the dad because the dad is only looking out for himself and her own daughter or his own daughter. While like the daughter notices that, and he actually even says that you don't ever want to help anyone. And then there's like other people in those situations. There's this actually sort of like antagonistic character that I call the Korean Hooper. Hooper being the name of the jerk from Night of the Living Dead, who like basically says they're infected, we can't let them on this train, and like will do anything to survive kind of thing. And he's that one of those jerks. There's these like there's these sisters. There's another, and they're like they're kind of they're senior citizens. One's younger and the other one's way older. And the older one is always wanting to like be very considerate and be kind and stuff, while the other one says that you can't let people take advantage of you and stuff like that. But like in all that, they're sisters and they love each other and such, so they're worried about each other as well. And then there's like this guy who you think is like sort of a jerk because like of his attitude and such. And he's the actor who portrays him is just hilarious. You think he's just like this like sort of brute who's just like kind of a bully, but you find out that he's actually looking out for this his pregnant wife, who's she's with child and stuff like that, and like this entire event happens, and there's kind of a shift too. I wouldn't say shift. I think basically the idea is that you can't judge people by by their cover. Like at first, you could assume that this guy's a jerk or whatever, but like then you meet his pregnant wife, then you get to know him a little bit, and it's like, no, this guy's just joking around. He's actually really cool. It like I said, it mixes the melodrama with the horror so well that I didn't think I could be surprised by a zombie movie ever. All of a sudden, I got surprised by this zombie movie, and it comes from Korea of all places, a place that my family is from, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess there is a little bit more you can do with this besides many episodes of Walking Dead.
That's our show for today. Thanks, Chuck and Dice, especially for watching all these movies. I'm really interested in watching Train to Busan. And we are in honor of Halloween of October and it being Halloween, and also Day of the Dead for those of you who.
What's that?
That's the Mexican Halloween. That's
say it in such disdain.
I don't say it to such disdain. I got nothing. I'm out of energy now. That's the Mexican Day of the Dead is the Mexican Halloween essentially. It's their kind of their own holiday, celebrating the dead as well. But in honor of those two holidays and the month we're in, we're still going to be streaming some horror games. I know Chuck and Dice has more horror games. He has more Blackwell to stream. I will be streaming more Virginia. I plan on trying to finish that, get the second half of that done. I also plan on streaming, because Halloween falls on a Monday, we actually are going to try to stream the weekend before, so Saturday and Sunday, the 30th and the 29th. October 31st, again, which is on a Monday, I need everyone's help in trying to finish PT. I never finished it, so if you guys can just comment and point me in the right direction, and then be afraid with me, because I really hate playing that game alone in the dark. But if I have you guys commenting, I have a little bit more resolve to finish it. Chuck and Dice also wants to touch upon Divinity. We actually had a game request from our own Vic Rules 666. Apologies, we have not gotten into this. We've both been very busy lately. I know that's not playing other video games and not Divinity. But we are for real this time going to stream soon.
I think that's about does it. Thanks for joining us. You can catch us on Twitter. We'll have our handles in the video and also in the description below. I am going to Kamikaze in LA at the Staples Center. So maybe next podcast I can talk a little about that. That starts. Kamikaze is the weekend of Halloween. Actually, it starts on Friday, goes on till Sunday. And I'm gonna probably go Friday because I'm taking off work to just attend it, and maybe Sunday. Saturday, actually, I'm going to the Arrow Theater for the Dusk Till Dawn Horrorthon, in which they show about 6 or 7 movies from dusk till dawn.
Do they also show the movie From Dusk Till Dawn?
They do not show the movie From Dusk Till Dawn, and I don't believe they've ever showed that film before, which is kind of interesting.
And yeah, if you are interested in any of the movies or games we've been talking about, feel free to send us a message either on Twitter or through YouTube. Any suggestions you guys have as far as any movies to watch, any board games to play, or any video games to play, let us know. But that's all I got.
All right. Thanks. Keep on rolling.